Welcome to Celebrate Recovery, to our first mental health panel. Yes, it's okay to clap and enjoy yourselves and participate. My name is Tanisha. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who's in recovery for codependency, celebrating that, and mental health issues. My name's Tanisha. So tonight we wanted to do this panel to cause awareness or bring awareness to the mental health epidemic that's going on in the U.S. but around the world as well. But we're going to focus in Michigan in our panel tonight. So what I wanted to do was kind of open up with a general question, and anybody can participate. Panel, you can answer if you like. What do you think mental health is, or what do you know of mental health? There's no wrong answers, as I tell our Bridge Streeters when I open up an open-ended question. Okay. Yes, please.
Emotional
Yeah, that's part. All right, we'll take that. So what I wanted to do was also bring a couple statistics to the room, which I may revisit this question later at the end of the panel tonight, because hopefully you've gained a new understanding and some more information. The statistics, some of them I'm going to use, are from the CDC and mentalhealth.org. This is adult data, fresh data from 2022, after the pandemic, which I was looking for so that we can be more inclusive and more fresh data. 1 out of 5 people live with a mental condition, whether it's PTSD, anxiety, panic disorder. 1 out of 20 live with what we categorize as a more severe diagnosis, which could be schizophrenia, long-term depression, bipolarisms, and so forth in that realm. 50% start to show these signs at the age of 14 years old. 75% start displaying in full-blown diagnosis by 24 years old. 1 in 7 children ages 6 to 18 have a display of a diagnosis symptom that goes undiagnosed and that is not treated until much later for many different issues, and we'll get into that as the panel goes forth. That comes from WHO, which is the World Health Organization. So what we're going to do is we'll start this way, if you don't mind, Mary. We're going to introduce Mary Grimm, who is a church member of ours that's been a part of UB for a long time and has her own story to tell for us. So we're going to start with Mary tonight.
I'm going to sit because of my bum knee, but my name is Mary, and I'm a believer in Jesus Christ who has struggled with many things, from alcoholism to mental illness to anger, and in some ways CR has helped with each of those. My official diagnosis for mental illness is I'm bipolar. I started exhibiting symptoms, but without self-knowledge, when I was a child. I would not be able to sleep at night. That's when I started drinking, because I knew if I had some alcohol, it would put me to sleep. Mom and Dad's honey whiskey and lemon cough syrup showed me that. Then into my young adulthood, I started exhibiting more signs, and they were numbed by the fact that I was drinking on a regular basis. And I wasn't a Christian yet. So I had nothing to fall back on except for whatever I could dream up. And my dreams were not very healthy oriented. And as I did finally get a diagnosis by the help of a therapist and a psychiatrist outside the Christian circles. My psychiatrist is outside the Christian circles. My therapist was a Christian. I began to see that I had an illness, but I thought I could handle it on my own. And I found that in many of the Christian circles I hung out in, they gave me messages like, "You're not praying enough," or "You have sin in your life that you're not confessing," or I don't know, a whole slew of things that fell along those lines. And that just alienated me from the Christian community. And this was before CR even had an inkling of doing something about mental illness. I think that came about when Rick Warren's son committed suicide, and suddenly the world is looking and saying, what's going on? What's going on in our world? It's not just out there, it's within our walls of the church too. I had many hospital visits, mental hospital visits, where I was put on different drugs. Bipolar is very hard to treat, especially back when I was first diagnosed. They had medicines to take care of depression, which is one half of bipolar, and they had medicines to take care of mania, which is the other half of bipolar. But taking the antidepressants put me in a mania, and taking the anti-mania drugs put me in a depression. And so it was very hard to come up with the right, I'll call it a cocktail, the right mix of drugs in the right amounts in order to maintain any kind of stability. And fortunately, in the time since then, they've developed meds specifically for bipolar, and it doesn't create that bouncing effect. And I've been on one of those since 2012, and I have avoided hospital stays for the most part. I think I've had one since then, where previous to that I'd had 10 or 15. Therapy has been very important. There are Christian therapists out there who understand what's going on and can help you. And my therapist is always directing me. We pray before we start our session. We pray at the end of our session. She's always asking me, what are you doing in your quiet times? Because I get enthused about the gospel and the word and what it's saying to me and how it's helping me. And she's able to build on that and say, that's good, let's think about it this way too. And so it's if you can find a Christian counselor, it's good to get one. If you can't find one, there are many good counselors out there who aren't going to force some secular ideas down your throat. A lot of Christians think that all that modern psychology stuff is wrong. Well, much of it is very helpful, and we just shouldn't write it all off. If you're in doubt, have someone go with you to your sessions that can help you determine whether or not you're getting some kind of secular theology thrown in with the healthy stuff. Another thing for me is, as a bipolar person, I failed to continue to take my meds. And as a result, when I was feeling good, I stopped them. When I was feeling bad, I said they didn't work. And so my recommendation is to anyone, follow the prescribed thing. Even if you don't think they're working, keep on them, give them a chance. Antidepressants can take up to 8 weeks to start to be effective, and many times, many weeks after that before they're fully effective. And that's true with all the bipolar meds out there too. When I first got diagnosed and first started coming around CR, there was nothing about mental illness. There was no help for that in the program. But what I did find, and what I think is still true, is you can get support. You know, CR is going to be supportive. They're going to, you know, I had people praying for me. They didn't exactly know what to pray, but they were praying, and the Holy Spirit knows, and, you know, conveyed that on to the Father. But so CR is a chance to be in a safe environment, and we need that. It's not therapy. You still need a therapist. You still need a psychiatrist, probably to prescribe meds, but it's a safe place to be, to share, to get the prayer support, to get encouragement, and so there's so much more to my story. I mean, I've been dealing with this since, intensely dealing with this since my diagnosis in 1999, and I still see a therapist on a weekly basis. I still see a psychiatrist every 3 months, and between 1999 and 2012, there are so many things that happened, and that could happen to anybody in this situation. And just to show you how much more there is, I wrote a book. And it's out there, it's a memoir, and it talks about those struggles. And it talks about them from the patient's point of view. So even if you are not struggling with a mental illness in here, talking to somebody with mental illness, reading my book or somebody else's book can give you an insight into what's going on inside the head of someone with a mental illness, so that you're not saying things like you're not praying enough. I'm really glad CR is addressing the hurts, habits, and hang-ups that come with mental illness for one big reason. If you're struggling with a mental illness, no other recovery is going to happen. In my alcoholism, until I addressed my mental illness, there's no way I was going to get sober and stay sober, at least in my thinking. I might stop drinking, but I was still going to be acting as a drunk, a dry drunk. And so, and that's true for any other area. You're really not going to get a good handle on hate if you are struggling with a mental illness, because everything seems to be against you unless you have a handle on that. So I'm really glad that CR is beginning to address it, because it can only aid recovery in other areas. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary.
Good evening. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I am in recovery for codependency, self-hatred, grief, and mental illness. I came in to celebrate recovery, to find a safe place where I could possibly be able to... Oh, sorry. My name's Julie. Woo! She didn't say throw that part in. I came in to find a safe place to be able to open up, hopefully, to talk through my issues, other than family, friends, and my counselor, in where I have had 6 and 9 years at CMH, which they closed my case in 2 years ago. When I was 16, my mom and dad was going through a bitter divorce. Being the oldest, I leaned more helping with my siblings before my parents did divorce. I was a person that most everyone could talk to, reach out to, call with areas of their needs. A very hard person to say no to anyone. When my father was alive, my mental illness is with the grief part, biggest part. When my father was alive, he would say to his friends and family, Julie is a go-to person. She can get everything and anything to hurting and people in need, or when there was a death. My dad would tell them, Julie is the one that will get the ducks in a row for whatever needs to be done. A lot of codependency. Then in the last few years of my dad's life, he held a huge secret from me, in which my brothers knew before me. So the days leading leading up to my dad's saying this, he was going to have surgery on his left side of his face. And I said, for what? He goes, oh, I'm just going to have this little surgery. I said, okay. I said, who's taking you? He goes, my sister will be up there a little later. I said, Dad, I am asking you, and this has been several times I've asked you, who is taking you? And he kept telling me my aunt would be there. I finally said, I will be taking you up there. Once we got there and registered, the nurses called him back. After a half hour or so, I walked back to the prep room. That is when the secret came out about my dad's surgery. He was telling the nurses he was going to have a mass taken out of the side of his face. The doctors told him it was cancer. After listening to talk about it, the nurse said, just had it about over a year ago, the same surgery. Also heard that her background of her life, she was being a guardian angel for my dad. She was a born Catholic, fully prepared with anything with Jesus, and my dad was also a strong Catholic. But it crushed me to have to find out this way of his cancer. Dad's first surgery was in July of 2003. Then in September, the dentist found more cancer in his jawbone. We ended up having to have a second surgery in November of 2003. Once we brought Dad home, my two brothers and my step-cousin and I took care of him. I did every third night and weekend. In 2004, more cancer was found. In July of 2005, my dad passed. I was very devastated. He was my sounding board. Sorry, guys. I knew this was going to do it. He was my sounding board, my go-to. His info for whatever was happening with us kids, whether he'd come home or he would stay on the road. My dad drove a car carrier. My dad was all about family. About 2 years after my dad passed, people were noticing a change in me. I was like shutting down. I basically did stuff for whatever I had to for Erica, or whatever Erica needed. And I worked, but once I came home, things were done, and I went to my bedroom and stayed there until the next day. Within 3 or 4 years, I was put on depression and anxiety medicine. I just didn't know where to turn for help. Then in 2008, I got hooked up with CMH for counseling and a med doctor there. Then I heard of a grief share group. I attended that, in which helped somewhat of me. Also, with this grief group, it helped me to open a little bit, but if you can tell, I still really haven't dealt with my dad's death. So there's days I still hide in my room. I don't want to come out. I don't want to face people. Grief is a hard thing to move through. So I'm glad I have the Celebrate Recovery. But in that, the grief is, it can lead to many other areas of your mental illness. You can find yourself pulling away from your family and your friends, which I did quite a lot. Even after my daughter started dating, I had a job and they had laid us off and I lost my medication, so I spiraled out of control. And I had to be hospitalized for suicide because I was so far in depression. I didn't want to face it, and it hurt. But once I faced and going to being hospitalized with that, I was better, back on the med that I can tolerate now. It's evened me out. I'm attending my CRs. I'm going to grief groups when they are available. And a lot of my therapy I do, being I still don't have a counselor, is I journal, I do some coloring, or just some basic self-help books to help me get through everything. So in closing, I wanted to let you know that grief is a difficult area. Please, there's many areas of mental illness. If you can find yourself in pulling away from your family and friends, please reach out. And also, there is a new number to help you, 988. I also took a class a couple weeks ago called Mental Health First Aid. I am now a certified mental health first aid advisor. So I have a very strong passion for this because everything I've gone through, and being a bus driver for 19 years, I have seen so many areas where these children need help, because I also watch a little girl, and finding out they don't have counselors in the schools is a scary thing, because there's so much out there for these kids that don't need to be hearing what they're hearing, and it's sad. So with that, I will pass it on. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm up next, and I don't have any notes, so I apologize if I wander. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ in recovery for pornography and food addiction, and my name's Chuck. I honestly, a few years ago, actually during my step study, I discovered that one of the main sources of the pornography addiction that I'd had basically stemmed from depression. As I shared my testimony earlier this summer, I was heavily picked on as a kid, and it basically made my own self-worth, my own view of myself, just gradually lower and lower and lower, as you can imagine. And by the time I reached my college years, instead of picking up a bottle or something like that, I basically had my own computer, and you can kind of figure out from the rest of it. So that was, I guess, my form of self-medication. And even after I graduated from college, the addiction was now haunting me. Even though I had started to very slowly turn my life over to God, because I grew up in a family of what you sometimes hear called as creasters. In other words, we attended church on Christmas and Easter. Creasters. And unfortunately, I didn't have a very strong Christian background. I knew who God was, but I did not classify myself as a believer, really. It's like I had the head knowledge, but I didn't have the relationship. And that was something that I actually avoided. My depression, and also the addiction too, it drives you in. I basically became a hermit. I didn't want to be around other people, and in that respect, I tried to just pull back from people. I tried to be a ghost. In fact, I think it's called ghosting now, where you just don't answer the phone. You don't talk to people. And and that's kind of who I was. And it was, in a way, it was kind of sad, because there was a number of people that were awesome people, and I found out later were actually Christians, that literally had to pull me out of my room to go do things. And I mean, like, go to dinner, go to the store, say hi to people. I mean, I really didn't want to be around other people. And so, that's where most of my depression came from. Unfortunately, I had to find all this stuff out cold turkey. I had to find out on my own. We didn't really have insurance to get any mental health coverage. I was very lucky that we had some high school counselors, and we had a few counselors that were in college. But at the same time, though, it only goes so far. And, all I could do was, I guess you might say, struggle bus with it. And so, obviously today I'm a much stronger believer than I was back then. I still struggle with depression. And there was even at one point before I was married, I wanted to take my own life. And I don't make it a secret whatsoever. And for anyone who's ever struggled to that degree, and if anyone ever wonders what the semicolon actually means, it basically means that your story's not done yet. It means it's not finished being written, and you have to keep going. And so, I needed a permanent reminder. I know we're Christians, not supposed to have tattoos. Yeah, well, Jesus has a tattoo. You can read Revelations. I'll show it to you later. But call me on it. I dare you. But no, seriously, I needed a daily reminder. And so, along with that, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13. So, I'm bad at memorization, but I can remember that, especially if I see it every day. So, we all, and I think we all kind of have our own scars, our own tattoos, our own marks. Honestly, I just decided to make mine an outside thing. I would much rather talk about it and someone ask me for help than to stay silent again. And I think that's all I really have, so thanks for letting me share.
Before Jason goes, Chuck touched on a couple of things that I have in statistics. Affordability for mental health is out of control in the U.S. It is one of the number one areas that people complained about and voiced when a few studies were done, the cost. I can tell you from experience that, praise the Lord, my insurance is better now, but my therapist, though she was wonderful, she was over $200 a pop. And my psychiatrist is running at $215, $230. That's just on the hour. Sometimes it's not even an hour. It's a half an hour to 45 minutes. And what we stress in the U.S. is that we are one of the countries that we go and we ask for help, but we have so many deterrents that keep us from getting help. In the U.S., well, actually globally, we rank number 2 in the worst mental health preparedness and resources right now in the world as one of the 11 countries with the highest capital income. So that right there tells you that we have an issue that's going on that we need to address. We mentioned a couple disorders on the panel tonight, one being bipolar, which is climbing the charts. If you don't know what bipolar disorder, which is several now, bipolar 1, 2, and what used to be called manic depression, it's a chemical imbalance of the brain. We don't know how it's triggered yet. Studies are showing that it could be genetic, it could be hereditary. Things can trigger it all of a sudden, and then bam, you're on a high and you're on a low. And you can't control that all the time without meds, therapy, and other psychiatrist needs or psychologists. So also with me, I didn't share anything about my mental illnesses, but I'll share one. I have borderline personality disorder, which is not bipolarism. Sometimes it's confused because of the symptoms. And one of the symptoms is disassociation with reality. You have a break. You no longer know where you are sometimes. It's not quite PTSD, but you just disassociate. And sometimes it comes from trauma or triggers. And if you look at the world right now, look at all the things that are going on that can trigger, that can cause anxiety, that you might not even have had or know you have. So it's very important to reach out, and if you feel funny or you need to just talk, reach out to someone and use the 988 number. All right, that's my spiel.
I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ in recovery for anger, depression, and addictions to food and pornography, and my name's Jason.
Hi, Jason.
So I'm just going to give a brief background of my mental history here, just my childhood. So I'm the youngest of 3 children, but my brother and sister are much older than I am. So while growing up, I was pretty much alone. My mother worked days, my father worked nights, and my brother and sister, I was just too young for them to hang out with me. So I basically grew up unsupervised. While growing up, my father was verbally abusive all the time, physically abusive some of the time. He could never control his anger ever. Always angry on vacations. Always angry. If I actually had a friend come over, I always like to tell the story of one time one of my friends said he was just never coming over again after being over at my house. So my mother, she had depression while I was growing up. She was usually just emotionally detached and distant all the time. Really only provided me any attention when I was misbehaving. My mother's parenting style is emotional blackmail and guilt and manipulation to get her way, to get compliance. To kind of give me this weird tension my whole life, still with me today, of equal amounts of dislike and love for my mother at the same time. One time when I was a child, that weird blend manifested when I cut the armchair, my mother's couch, just to get in trouble and get attention at the same time. Self-image is a big issue for me as well. When I was in 3rd grade, my 3rd grade teacher just told me I was fat, just use those words, and that kind of started my mother taking me to Sweating to the Oldies and Weight Watchers classes, and I'd get positive attention when the scale went down and negative attention when the scale went up. So that kind of, when you're in 3rd grade, that's kind of it's setting you up to have a belief that, weight is your image and everything. So that's kind of the foundational story of my mental health. In 2008, at the age of 34, my doctor diagnosed me with depression. And when my doctor said, you have depression, I looked at her and I said, well, I'm not sad and I'm not mopey, so you must be wrong. And she's like, well, that's only one possible symptom of depression. That's just a misconception. What I've been telling my doctor is that I was angry all the time, negative about myself all the time, and pretty much hated everything. And I didn't feel like myself. And I just went to the Mayo Clinic's website today, and in addition to being, sad as one of the symptoms of depression, there's also angry outbursts, loss of interest in normal activity, being agitated, feeling worthless, and constantly dwelling on past failures. That's just there's a big list of symptoms. So remember I said I was 34 and my doctor diagnosed me with depression. And I liked what Mary said earlier, symptoms without self-knowledge. So let me read to you the poem that was published, I wrote when I was 13 in our junior high poetry book. The poem is titled, Depression. Depression is the color gray. It smells like a rainy day and tastes like weak old gum already chewed. Depression sounds like a dying dog whining and feels like a cold floor in the morning. So that was me at 13. not even realizing I was depressed, at the time, and not even being diagnosed until I was 34, 21 years later. So, and I kind of wanted to discuss the rest of my time is stigmas and how we should be treating people and how we should be feeling about ourselves. The first time I ever went to, before I ever came to CR, I was thinking, well, this is a place for those people with just substance abuse problems. And the night before I came to CR for the first time, I actually had like nightmares all night long about how it would be really, really weird. And in reality, for the first time in my life, I was in a room full of people that wanted to listen and wanted to truly know me without any judgment. Stigma 2, I started seeing a therapist after I was diagnosed with depression. Kind of had nightmares about that too, because I thought that was going to be what you see on TV, where you're just lying down on a couch and somebody's saying over and over again, how did that make you feel? And it's nothing like that. It's absolutely nothing like that. My therapist, I was lucky enough to go to a Christian therapist. I'm blessed to have a job that cares about mental health, so we have mental health insurance. He gave me homework. He gave me homework all the time. I had to fill out these worksheets, and it basically gave me emotional self-awareness of putting words with just the random feelings and emotions I had in my head. And I brought some of those worksheets with me tonight. He gave me a worksheet on what's called ANTS, A-N-T-S. I had a lot of ants. And ANTS stands for automatic negative thoughts. I was trapped in everything was an automatic negative thought. There's different categories of ANTS, fortune telling and catastrophic thinking. It's basically saying, I'm going to predict that something bad is going to happen. And then catastrophic thinking is not only is something bad going to happen to me, but it's going to be just the consequences of that badness are going to be terrible. Then there's mind reading, trying to say, well, I know the motives of that person was bad. They intended to hurt me without even knowing what their motives are. Overgeneralization, my kids do this all the time too. I do it. It's saying nothing ever works for me. I'm always messing up. I'm never going to be happy. That's overgeneralization when you say that. And then there's the should thoughts. I should have done this. I should have said that. This person should have treated me better. And it just sets you up for a lot of anger. Which brings me to, since I struggle with anger and my therapist knew it, I didn't know how many different types of anger there was. I mean, he talked to me about repression and suppression anger. He talked to me about passive-aggressive anger, paranoid anger, shame-based anger, deliberate anger, and then just resentment and hate. So it was really eye-opening to see the wide range of things. And one thing he talked to me about, and something you wouldn't know unless you get a good therapist, is the physical effects of anger. He gave me this huge list of different chemicals that are released in the brain from anger. And if you just ignore your anger, they don't go away. The hormones in your body are still raging through your body by just ignoring the anger. So he taught me different ways to extinguish the anger by correcting your thoughts, correcting the lies that you're telling yourself that are sometimes leading to the anger. I had to fill out what is called a Romans 12:2 journal. Don't be conformed by the patterns of this world, but be conformed by God. Paraphrase Jason version there. Sorry. But I still have all that stuff because it's good to look back on some of this stuff, because since I've been coming to Celebrate Recovery and I've had all this knowledge, it's really great to be able to go back and look at this stuff every once in a while, and get good tools. A good therapist is going to give you good tools to help you work through some of this stuff. So the Romans 12:2 journal, I'd have to write down the lie that I told myself. I'd have to write down what automatic negative thought category it was, and I'd actually have to think about the feelings. And I couldn't just say angry. He actually gave me an umbrella with 10 different words for anger, ranging from, are you like a 1 on the angry scales? I'm just frustrated. Where a number 4 is, I'm feeling pretty bitter. A number 7 is, I'm furious. And a number 10 is, I am in full outrage. So you had to be more specific in your journal than just, well, I'm angry today. Well, what does that mean? How angry are you? So, and I think that's it. I had one more stigma, and that kind of goes back into, I'm sorry, meds. And, you know, there's a concept of people in the church saying, well, you shouldn't need CR, you shouldn't need therapy, you shouldn't need antidepressants, you know, you should just pray harder. That's very unhelpful. I still take my antidepressants. And I just want to remind people that God put us in community together, and everyone in that community has a role to play. Everyone has talents. God gives everyone abilities, doctors, engineers, teachers, nurses, and therapists, and even the chemists that come up with the medicines. I mean, we're in this community together. God put them there for a reason, for us to use the community.
Thanks, Jason. I'll skip stigmas because that's what I had on this sheet here. I feel like sometimes everybody's in my head and they have all my ideas and things, but that's the cool part of a unique panel. We can all come together and have ideas and share. So, one of my questions actually happened to be, you know, what is a stigma? Or what do you think is a stigma? Or what do you know, we try not to judge, but we judge. And sometimes we look at folks and we say, oh, you're crazy, oh, you're on meds, and oh, you're these things. But we're people just like you, and we want to function, and we want to be a part of society just like you, and those that don't suffer from mental illnesses. One of the stigmas I came across was there were days that I didn't want to get up and go to work. It wasn't because the job was necessarily bad or the people at work were bad. It was just like what was mentioned on the panel. There was a 2-week period I took off of work because I just could not function. I could not get out of bed. I could not do something simple like take a shower. And I'm a parent, and it's hard when you're in this stage, but you have all these different roles to fulfill. So we would like to open the floor quickly to any questions that anyone may have.